I would like to start off by apologizing for the time it has taken me to upload this. I'd like to lie and say it was only for the sole purpose of suspense, but it's really because I could not, for the life of me, figure out which murder I wanted to write about. There's quite a list to choose from, although some are rather anticlimactic and others just weren't dramatic enough to be a finale. Believe it or not, I'm a big fan of dramatic conclusions. Anyway, I finally made up my mind about what I'm going to write about, so I suppose we should get on with that. Thank you all for coming along this ride, reading about my kills, and I hope you enjoy this one. It was springtime, a little while after the death of Tatia. There were a few murders in between Tatia and this one, but this specific one is the focus of this story. I remember the events leading up to this as if it was yesterday. It was the weekend, and I was at home, having a late breakfast when the phone rang. It was my father. I saw him every week or so, and we talked on the phone a bit as well, but lately, I hadn't seen his wife Agnes. Every time I would go over to their house, Agnes would not be there. I found it odd, and I thought maybe they had broken up and he didn't want to tell me about it. Oh, how I was wrong. Hey Landon, listen, I have to tell you something. I wanted to tell you earlier, but well, I don't know. I'm telling you now. He sounded nervous, like he was talking to a killer. I started thinking that maybe he had done something to Agnes. Yeah, sure. What is it? I asked, spreading cream cheese on my bagel. Well, son, we wanted to tell you a while ago, but we didn't want to jinx ourselves. Now that everything seems to be fine though, we think it's time to tell you. I stopped. Dad, what is it? He sighed, and I heard Agnes in the background whisper, just tell him. Landon, Agnes and I are having a baby. She's pregnant, he said. There was dead silence. Agnes was young, a lot younger than my father, probably a couple years older than me. That's great. How far along is she? I asked. Almost 9 months. Her due date is in 2 weeks, my dad said. He sounded relieved. I really don't know what he expected me to say, but it was obvious that he was expecting something bad. Wow. Well, best of luck, I guess, I mumbled. I didn't have the energy for this, and I had just lost my appetite. It all started to make sense. Agnes had been purposely hiding from me so that I would not see her all fat and pregnant. It made me really angry. They were the only parents that I had left, and they were keeping things from me. Although, to be fair, to them, my mother was still missing. I remember excusing myself, telling my dad I had a lot of work to do, and then hanging up the phone after promising Agnes that I would be at the hospital in 2 weeks to meet my step whatever. She wouldn't tell me the gender, kept saying it was a surprise and giggling like a toddler. It was pretty fucking disgusting. I felt betrayed and disgusted. Annika had ruined my life, but it's not like I could go get revenge again. She was already dead. But Agnes and her stupid fetus were not dead. No, they were very much alive, in a nice house, living their dreams. It made me sick. This wasn't fair. What did Agnes ever do to put her above me? Nothing. Not one fucking thing. She was just some stupid college student who pretended to love my father to get money, and now she got to live a good life with him. It was ridiculous, unfair, insane. I just hated her. I hated her and her stupid child, and my father. I spent the next few days researching birth and watching videos. I pretty much got the idea about how to perform a C-section, as well as how exactly giving birth was. The videos were a bit much, but then again, I once chopped up my mother and put her in a garbage bag. So this wasn't far from that. I pretty much figured that I knew what I needed to know, and so 3 days before Agnes's due date, I took my supplies and drove over to my dad's house. It was in the middle of the night, and I had a key, so getting in wasn't that difficult. Also, lucky for me, my dad's house had a few large trees in the front yard, making it impossible for anyone to see me going into the house. I walked in and saw the hospital bags laying by the door, and then carefully made my way upstairs and into the bedroom where they were sleeping. I took the rags out of my pocket, which I had covered in chloroform, and placed one on my father's face and the others on Agnes. Then I carried each one down to my van and set them in the back. I then drove off to the spot that I had in mind. It was my mother's old house. I had kept the property, but it was pretty much shit now. No one wanted it, and it was located in a rather secluded neighborhood where the neighbors were pretty far away and no one bothered each other. By the time I dragged them into the basement and tied down Agnes, the chloroform was wearing off and I could hear my father groaning. I grabbed the needle from the bag I was carrying and injected him with an anesthetic, and then did the same for Agnes. I don't know exactly how long it took to cut her open and take her baby out and then close her back up. I didn't keep track of time, and to be honest, I didn't really care. It was a girl. She cried after I took her out, but I managed to stop her cries. I cleaned her off and wrapped her in some blankets, then I took her upstairs. When I came back down to the basement, my dad was tugging at his restraints lazily, the effects of the drugs still wearing off. "Landon, what is this? What are you doing?" he asked. I could hear Agnes shifting around behind me, and my dad leaned over to try to look at her. "Adrian, what's going on?" she asked. I could hear the panic in her voice. "Landon, is that you?" she asked right after. "I killed Mom," I said. My dad stared at me. "What?" he asked. "Grace. I killed her, chopped her up and buried her in the woods." My dad lifted his restrained hand and rubbed his forehead. "Okay, Landon, it's okay. I'm not going to tell the police, but you have to let us go." "I killed Annika too, and Mark Markinson, and that teacher who died of an allergy." My dad sighed and I could hear Agnes whispering to herself. "Landon, we won't tell, okay? You just need to let us go. Agnes needs to go to the hospital. She could give birth any second," my dad said. He didn't even care. I just confessed to fucking murder, and he barely even flinched. Unfucking believable. I walked over to Agnes and stood above her as she laid still on the table. "I killed a lot of people," I whispered. "Please, Landon, my baby," she whispered back. "Oh, for fuck's sake," I screamed. Agnes flinched. "Your stupid baby is fine. She's perfectly fine. Upstairs sleeping," I shouted. No one said anything. "Landon?" Agnes asked. "What? What are you going to do with us?" Her voice was small, like a child. I didn't respond. I think she knew what I was going to do, and I don't think she wanted me to say it out loud. "Son, listen, you don't have to hurt us," my dad said. I turned around to look at him. "I know I don't have to, you idiot. I want to." My dad was crying, and then of course, Agnes started crying. "Shut up. Shut the hell up," I screamed. I couldn't take this anymore. They ruined my mood. So I went back upstairs and had left them there. I didn't go back down until the next day with a tray of food and some antibiotics for Agnes, just in case. When I entered the basement, they were already awake and talking to each other. I didn't get to hear anything, however, because they stopped when they heard me open the door. "I brought you some food," I said. I handed my dad a bowl of beef stew and a cup of orange juice. Then I sat the tray down and untied Agnes so she could sit up. I handed her the bowl of food and orange juice as well, and then handed her the antibiotics. "Thank you," she mumbled. I sat there and watched them eat all of the stew and then finish their drinks. "Landon?" my dad asked. I looked over at him. "Do you think I could see my daughter?" "You just saw her. In fact, you just ate her," I replied. Agnes gagged, and my dad went pale. Then Agnes started wailing. She just continued to repeat no over and over again. It was really pissing me off. So I took a knife out of my pocket, shoved her back down on the table, and cut open her wound again. She screamed and my father yelled at me to stop, but I didn't. I just sliced her neck open too, and then she stopped screaming, and soon after that, she was dead. My father was crying now, and he kept begging me to stop, but I just slit his throat too. After they were both dead, I basically did the same I had done with my mother. I cut them up, removed their teeth, mutilated their faces, and cut off their fingerprints. Put them in 2 bags, mixing up the body parts, and then cleaned the entire basement from top to bottom. I took the rags, mops, and cleaning supplies that I had used and threw them into another bag. Then I went back into the house, took baby Grace with me in her portable carrier, and buckled her into the van. I drove all the way to the woods where I had buried my mother and repeated the process. This time making 2 holes and burying the bodies and cleaning supplies, then adding the dead bird to both. They weren't in the same spot as my mother was. I wasn't an idiot. I managed to finish up without the baby crying. She was so calm now. It was like killing her parents had brought her some peace. I got back in the van and fed her some formula, watching her fall asleep again. Then we drove back home, Grace and I. Our jobs were done, for the time being that is. Grace is 16 now. She looks a lot like my dad. She likes knives. She has a huge collection of them. Some are even engraved. I've been buying her some for her birthdays and for Christmas. It's what she asks for, so it's only fair. I could tell when she had her first kill, there was a change in her. She looked braver, smarter. She didn't get caught, but that wasn't a surprise. I knew I had taught her well.